All right. Hi, I'm Paul Robichaux, CTO at Quadratech, and with me is Mike Weaver, my ace tenant-to-tenant guy. Hi, Mike.
Hey, Paul. It's been an interesting night, huh?
It has been. You are in London and I'm in Huntsville. Neither of us are in New Orleans, and yet Microsoft went ahead with Ignite anyway. I'm not really sure what they were thinking, but there you
Yeah,
have it.
the hours were a little difficult this week to make that work for those of us. Being a US expat, I've been on both sides of this before, so it's interesting to experience the time zone challenge from the other side of the pond here.
Yeah, they really, I said this in my Practical 365 wrap up. I give Microsoft's event planning team all the credit in the world. It was immensely
Absolutely.
difficult for them to pivot at the last minute like they had to. And the event's getting good reviews. There's good content. The technical pieces have all gone smoothly. Everybody seems to be pretty happy with the flow, even though we all miss our friends drinking beer. Um, Lord, the restaurants in New Orleans, I miss those. But I think Ignite went about as well as could be expected now that we're all in, COVID hell.
I think the one thing that's interesting for you and I is you and I spent a lot of time on the expo floor talking to our customers and not able to go to sessions. So it's actually been interesting for the last few years to, I've been on the plane downloading videos or for weeks watching them, and actually being able to watch them live has been an interesting experience as well.
Good. So we don't have a lot of time, but I think, man, there's so much we could easily spend an hour just talking about the things Microsoft promised to do, not even the things that they did and delivered since last Ignite. But if I had to ask you one thing that surprised you to see Microsoft announce or talk about publicly, what would you say that it is?
So for years we've been demanding better inter-tenant migration for merger acquisition and divestiture scenarios. So we've been seeing the cross-tenant mailbox MRS preview, mailbox move free in moving to public preview. It's been in private preview for quite some time. That's exciting and expected. But what was unexpected for me is seeing some of the pending technology, and I say pending because we really don't have a timeline on it because it's not even in preview, but some of these cross-tenant migration options for SharePoint and OneDrive for Business. And there's some really, really good claims in there where they've taken customer feedback. I'm a little concerned on the performance and timeline. A lot of us, 90 days in an M&A, a delay, so waiting for a feature
Right.
and it not making 90 days is you in turn not making your own deadline. So I'm really curious to see as this goes and how that market develops.
There's a lot going on in that market. Microsoft is sometimes they're slow to get started exploring new markets, but then they sort of put a toe in the water, and the next thing you know, it's time for a cannonball. So we'll see how their follow through is.
And
I
there
think
was
the
a
thing,
lovely message at the end that warned license levels. There's you might need a certain license to do this. So I'm
yeah,
curious to
you
see what that
you
is as
might
well.
need a certain license level.
Exactly.
I think this thing that surprised me most is also licensing related, and that is we are getting new on-premises server versions, but they're only going to be available by subscription.
Yeah.
So
But what was so interesting is on the consumer side, there is also a pending announcement where you're going to be able to buy a consumer version again. So it's interesting to see kind of that mix. But on-prem licensing for Exchange, I mean, that's a shock.
well, it makes perfect sense when you think about it. And if you think about Ignite 2019, if you think about Ignite 2018, there's been a steady pushback from enterprise customers and from MVPs where they've said it's not time to kill off the on-prem products yet. And to be clear, Microsoft never at any point said they were going to stop producing on-prem Exchange. That was just the assumption we all made because you can see, if you think of it like a scale, you can see where the bulk of the investment is going. It's going into the service. And that makes perfect sense. That's the right thing for Microsoft to do. But there are still customers who won't or can't or don't want to move to the cloud yet.
Yep.
We all know the cloud is there's so much cloud gravity. Everybody is going to get dragged into the cloud at some point. But it makes sense for Microsoft to keep doing this on-prem thing, and by doing it as a subscription, they solve one of the problems that they've had, which is how do we pay for continued on-prem development and having a separate branch. But they've also laid the groundwork really nicely for having what they're going. I don't remember if they use this term specifically or not, but what will become like the equivalent of the long-term servicing branch for Windows, where they've got Exchange Server. It won't have a version necessarily. It will be updated every so often when Microsoft needs to. The pace of upgrades will slow, and as long as you keep paying, it keeps being supported. I think that's the right thing for them to do. But frankly, I'm a little surprised that they decided to bite the bullet and do it. So good for them.
Yeah, it's gonna be interesting to see how this plays out and what the cost on that model is going to be. I know a lot of firms are really concerned about that. because some have done on-prem because they've been, have figured out it's cheaper to stay on-prem, and that is quickly becoming not the case in where the market's going in knowledge. But it's going to be very interesting to see how this plays out.
It's very true. So if you had to pick one thing that you're excited about seeing at Ignite, what would you say it is? It's probably Azure Orbital, right? You're going to use that for your global satellite network that I know you're about to roll out as part of your Mad Mike, right?
That's probably not. I know what I'm really going to be focusing on is the cross-tenant features, especially the cross-tenant mailbox migration moving into preview. I've already spent most of my morning this morning getting that set up in my dev environment. For MSDN subscribers, you can now move to E5 licenses. So I spent my morning converting my lab from E3 to E5, and I might have a blog on that later on how to do that. So that's where my focus has been, and that'll be my next week or so, getting that fully set up and ready for demo.
It's going to be an exciting and interesting journey to see what Microsoft does with those features. I think that's probably a safe, NDA-friendly way to put it.
Yeah.
When I think of the things that I saw at Ignite that made me go, "Oh, that's so cool! I can't wait to try that." One of them is something that has been in Windows Office Insider Fast for a little while. And I mentioned this the other day on Twitter, but couldn't say what it was because it was still NDA. Now, if you have an Excel worksheet that you're sharing with other people through OneDrive or SharePoint, if you go in and edit the filters that display, control what gets displayed, you can choose whether those filters only apply to you or whether they apply to everybody, which means when you have a shared spreadsheet, never again will you open it up and go, "What the hell? Where did all that data go?" Only to find out that somebody filtered it.
That's a huge feature. That is really exciting.
Right? But at the same time, it's like the story about the lion with the thorn in its paw, right? I mean, it's just a little thing, but it's a big pain. So excited for that. I really like the meeting recap features in Teams because I go to a lot of meetings and it's very helpful. And even though I go to a lot of them, there are many that I can't go to. So having the ability to go back and see after the meeting, all the notes, the transcript, the record of who attended, that's pretty powerful. Maybe the thing I am most cautiously excited about is what Microsoft is calling Stream tomorrow. The improvements to the Stream engine, the improvements for storage, the ability to finally easily but safely share a stream video with somebody outside your organization as a guest is a huge time saver, again, for meeting recordings. And Microsoft is clearly doing what they did with Exchange. So Exchange used to be its own workload, and then they started to turn it into part of what Microsoft calls the substrate, where Exchange is just a way to store data that all kinds of different M365 services can use. And we're seeing OneDrive make that same transition. So Stream is going to use OneDrive as a storage bucket and expose it through a nice web app, probably a mobile app, that'd be my guess. But the improvements we get from having OneDrive be the storage mechanism instead of Stream having its own, really excited about that if Microsoft can deliver it. I think they can.
And for me, I'm equally excited. I know I'm the migration-minded person, so usability is huge too. But being, the M&A person, we haven't been able to provide that transfer in an M&A scenario. So that changing the storage backend suddenly opens up a lot of opportunities where that'll be able to move. And with Stream being the backend storage for meeting recordings, but also just huge learning and training that organizations have done, especially with COVID and the remote learning needs. Losing that data is a huge deal. So that's really exciting for me on that front to be able to see it migrate over.
All right, so one closing question. If Microsoft brought Ignite back as a live event next year, where would you want them to have it?
I have to admit I'm enjoying not traveling far, so I'd love for it to come over the pond to Europe. I have to admit I'd love to see it back in Orlando. It runs like clockwork in Orlando. They seem to have it under really good control. And familiar. I know us as someone that goes every year, it became routine, so we kind of focus on the event more so than all the logistics. Others may want something more exciting, but it just runs like clockwork in Orlando.
It's funny because I was going to say any place but Orlando, but
all right,
but you're right. The focus should be on the event, and the events run best, in my experience, when they're in Orlando.
Yep.
I love New Orleans. I'm from near there. There are a lot of other fascinating places where Microsoft could potentially have Ignite at maybe a smaller scale. But when it's in Orlando, it's easy to get in. There are plenty of places to eat. There are plenty of accommodations for every price range and every preference. And the event is able to just sort of spread its wings and do its thing. So, okay, I will reluctantly agree with you. I think
All
Orlando
right.
would be a pick for next year. So, Microsoft, pay attention when you're scheduling 2021. Mike and I have voted, and let it be so. All right. Well, thanks, Mike. I will talk to you later.
I'm going back to my lab. Enjoy your day,
Right
Paul.
on. Thanks
Thank
for
you.
watching, everybody.